Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation and Happy New Year. My name is Iuso and I'm the Director of Marketing at Alessa and today's moderator. I hope everyone is doing well and we thank you for taking the time to join us today. Now, today's presentation is called Detecting and Countering Dark Web Money Laundering Risks. Now, the dark web is an attractive place for illicit activities. Just recently, an Australian man was arrested for being the operator of a darknet marketplace that facilitated the sale of drugs, stolen credit card information, and malware. Now, it was reported that this particular site had nearly 500,000 users, more than 2,400 vendors, and at least 320,000 transactions were conducted via this marketplace. Now, with so many users, vendors, and transactions, how do you know that none of these illicit dark web transactions are not flowing through your financial institution? So to help you answer these questions, in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about common criminal typologies and indicators of dark web affiliation, how financial institutions can incorporate dark web indicators into their AML models, strategies to investigate dark web activities, and how to use oversight tools like KYC, EDD, and transaction monitoring to flag and resolve and report suspicious activities. Now, before I introduce our speaker, we'd like to learn a little more about you. Specifically, we want to know your level of understanding of the darknet. So take a moment to answer your question. When thinking about your understanding of the darknet, have you used it to test transactions? So you're a deep diver. Have you accessed it through the Tor network using an Onion browser? You're more of a novice. You know it's out there, so more of a surface person. And no clue. You're just enjoying the beach from afar. Let us know where you're at. So today's presenter is Joseph Iuso. Now, Joseph is a solutions-focused senior executive and consultant with more than 30 years of success across the IT, AML compliance, banking, financial services, e-commerce, digital currency, and identity industries. He has leveraged his extensive experience to support financial services and retail payment sectors to ensure optimal ROI. Joseph serves as the Executive Director for the Canadian MSB Business Association. He's the Head of Business Development at KYC 2020. He's the Chief Compliance Officer at Payment Source, the Chief AML Officer at BitBuy, and advisors at Unitrellis. Now, throughout his career, Joseph has held executive or senior leadership positions at companies including Use My Services, TechChand, ACH Returns RX, JAWS, RBC, CIBC, IBM, ISM, ACI, ING Direct, as well as board positions in fintech and not-for-profit organizations. So, he is a CAMP specialist, a graduate from Mohawk College with a computer system technology degree, and he holds a number of other certifications in project management, compliance, business, and technical areas. So clearly, Joseph has a lot of experience and will be able to provide a lot of insights into these topics. So with that, I'd like to hand over the presentation over to Joseph.
Thanks, Anu, and thanks, Alessa, and Nicole, and everybody for putting this together today. I'm split between two screens, just because I've got two screens, and so my notes are here and the presentation's over there. Before I jump off the bio, just a little bit more about me. I actually started in computers when I was 13 years old back in 1979, and just progressed through the late 20s into banking, early push into business and project management when I was in my 30s. And then I started, I used my services as an MSB and ran that for about 16 years. So I've got a lot of different backgrounds. You'll see at the bottom there, my Twitter handle and my LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me, go ahead. So I represent today the Canadian MSB Association, and I'm thankful for Alessa for the sponsorship back in November. And this is part of that sponsorship is to do a presentation and show that the Canadian MSB Association is out there, and we're really about collaboration, information sharing, and training, and really about advocacy for the MSBs in Canada. It was founded by myself and two others with Grant Thornton back in 2013. And I took a bit of a hiatus in 2015 to 17 and got hired back as the executive director in 2018. This year, we actually applied for lobbyist status. So the CMSBA now has a lobbyist through me to the Canadian government on behalf of the association. Overall, we have about 100 paid members and about 200 to 300 people that attend our annual general spring sessions. And we're trying to do this year, we're trying to do some monthly sessions, so look out for that. And lastly, feel free to follow the CMSBA on Twitter and on LinkedIn to get the latest updates, infos, and alerts related to money service business and compliance in Canada. So, wow, okay, so majority of the people are, I don't know what's out there on the surface. Oh, that's good. So we're going to try and get you to the next level, which is thinking about the access to the Tor network and Onion browser. And I'm not going to go into the Tor network and Onion browser. You can actually Google that and find more information on it. So that was good because I didn't think we were going to go into a deeper dive and discuss items. So awesome. Let's go back to the slides again. Then. And feel free to ask any questions. I think I've got the chat, the presenter window here. So if you have anything, you have any questions or anything like that, or you want to interrupt, or it's kind of important that you want to ask the question, please feel free to ask them, and it won't stop me from the presentation. So today's agenda, we're going to describe in a definition what the dark web is. We're going to do a brief history so you can see where it came from. It's not like it came from nowhere, but we'll go through that. We're going to walk through an example of how to purchase stuff on the dark web. We're going to talk about some of the typologies, indicators, and ways to report it outside of the usual SAR and STRs. And then we'll talk about some key takeaways and have a Q&A session. Disclaimer, haha. Okay, any compliance presentation wouldn't be a presentation without disclaimers. So I'm not an expert in all things dark webs. I'm just sharing my experience today. I'm not a lawyer, so nothing I say today should be interpreted as legal advice. I don't represent any government or government agency, so nothing I should say here should be interpreted as official government statement. If you have any particular questions involving people's names or confidential information, come and see me after. And I know this is sort of terrible on a virtual session, but if you ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter, I can deal with it then. Don't ask the question in an open forum. Really try and keep those things to yourself. This presentation is intended for the general audience. It is not meant to go into a deep dive on business, technical, or compliance focus. And feel free to ask questions, like I said earlier. So, what is the dark web? Well, according to Wiki, they function primarily as black markets, selling or brokering transactions involving drugs, cyber arms, weapons, counterfeit currency, stolen credit card, forged documents, unlicensed pharmaceuticals, steroids, and all kinds of other illicit goods, as well as the sale of legal products. I think this definition, though, is missing a part, because the part that's missing is really the services. And the fact that the escrow service actually the dark web service actually acts as an escrow service, much like Amazon, eBay, Shopify, etc. This ensures that the dark net marketplace is having order in chaos. So a brief history. So back in 1979, when I first started, I actually had a 150 baud modem and was plugging into what's called the bulletin board services. And this actually kept going through till the 1990s when we had 28K baud modems. So we went from 150 bytes to 28,000 kilobytes to connect to the bulletin board services, and then eventually to the internet. I actually personally built a BBS software back in the early 80s and sold about 1,000 of them at 3 World of Commodore shows. Um, I had actually run one 24/7 using a Commodore 64, a bunch of drives and things like that, migrated to Commodore 128. And really what you can see here was the example that I showed, and the link to the website is there. It shows a pretty good history of a lot of those BBSs that were out there. And this one in particular, you can see it's got things like no fees. Shoot, I'm having trouble reading this. Yeah, no fees, bombs, computer hacking, drugs, fake ID, firearms, con games, investigative techniques, locksmithing, phone phreaking, which is sort of like the new phishing attacks that when you get an SMS message, but in this case it was an auto dialer, political revenge, sex, surveillance, and survival. And this was an actual website. There was actually lots of them. If you go to that link, you'll find all kinds of BBSs. I don't know if they're still around. I haven't tried it in a while. I'm sure there's a few out there that are doing strange things, but there are literally thousands and thousands. Every city had maybe 3 or 4 running 24/7s, had chat groups, all kinds of stuff. And the reason why I picked this one in particular is because it was actually focused on typical darknet information, but it wasn't called darknet back then. They called it the anarchist site or anarchy online. So it's been around for a while. Oops, I already did the next slide. I gotta remember I'm on my own slide here. So next slide. So brief history, 2001 to 2005. It morphed into, when the internet came around, there was also this thing called the Usenet. And so that sort of morphed into the next stage, or chat groups. And you could find literally tens of thousands of different things, from hacker tools to illegal software to drugs to illegal movie downloads and porn, among other things, because obviously the internet was born on porn for the most part. And nowadays, the Usenet is still out there, but I went looking for it because I haven't touched it since the late 90s. And it's still out there, and it's a paid service because somebody has to host all this information, has to store it all. Like I said, there's a lot of different things there. The software and downloads are still happening, from my understanding of reading some of the groups. And really, it was the underbelly for the good, the bad, and the ugly prior to Facebook and social media and all these other things. So you can find anything pretty much in these groups. Next slide. So somewhere around 2006, there was the original darknet that seemed to have figured out the formula. It was called Adam Flowers, and then eventually morphed into the farmers market. It was considered the proto Silk Road, or the site that predated the Silk Road and gave the Silk Road its ideas. They introduced an escrow and selling service, much like the other services did before it, but it was more transparent and you could see what's going on. In around 2010, it moved to the Tornet, the Tornet being the encrypted network that was set up by the US government, actually, to allow for encrypted messages and sites and things like that. So it obfuscates your IP address and your packets and things like that. But I'm not going to go into that. Again, you can Google that. It was actually taken down by the DEA in 2012 as part of Operation Atom Bomb. The site reported the owner was Peter Willems, and he actually pleaded guilty to drug trafficking and money laundering charges. It was only giving a minor 10 years. That seems like a lot, but you'll see in a second it wasn't actually, given what he was doing. So in and about the same time, around 2011, Ross Ulbricht, who goes by the nickname Dread Pirate Roberts, started the Silk Road, and he figured out how to combine the Bitcoin and Tor networks to create the first successful escrow service and seller vetting for the darknet. He was actually taken down in 2013. And then in 2015, he was convicted of money laundering, computer hacking, conspiracy to traffic fraudulent identities, and conspiracy to traffic narcotics by way of the internet. And he was actually sentenced to double life plus 40 years. And essentially, he was doing the same as the previous character there, Peter. Since then, it's like killing a pregnant spider. I don't know if you've ever killed one. I have, and what ends up happening is thousands of spiders all come out of the sack there, and you're literally dealing with more than you ever thought you could ever handle. So they've come and gone, literally hundreds of sites. They're getting seized by the U.S. government, Interpol, European governments, et cetera, et cetera. It's basically whack-a-mole at this point. I don't know if they'll ever be able to shut it all down. And I'll talk about one of the examples that came out earlier this week. But a lot of them are also exit scamming, where maybe they're getting close to being detected, or maybe they just feel that they've got enough in the kitty where the operator of the darknet market actually says goodbye, closes it all up, and takes all the crypto because they're in the escrow. They have the money. So that makes the buyers and sellers out of pocket. So it's buyer beware and seller beware. And pretty much every site on the darknet is on Tor, or what they call Tor sites, using an onion domain. In this case, you can actually still find those websites by going to this domain called darkwebmarkets.org. There's lots of them out there, but they list the sites, and they provide different links to those onion sites or the darknet sites, and they actually ping them to see if they're up or down, and so you can actually figure out which ones they are. They're always moving around, changing their addresses, just because the nature of the whole darknet market. So I just want to go through a quick walkthrough of a website. So this one's a pretty tame one. It's called Canazon. They're just selling illegal weed, or maybe legal weed, I don't know. Other drugs like edibles and pharmaceuticals and things like that. And that's all they focus on. They're pretty particular in their marketplace. I'm going to be showing you a walkthrough of how to purchase through the darknet and some of the insights into that. But you'll see some of the same things that you see with the other sites like Amazon and eBay and the likes. But there's also a little nuance there on how they protect the buyers and sellers from prying eyes. Obviously, I've skipped over the whole logging into the Tor browser and the fact that really, if you're going to do this kind of stuff, you should have a separate device than your regular computer. Some of these sites have JavaScripts which try and penetrate your computer or do some nasty things or install some weird software. So if you don't have another computer, maybe get a USB stick with the small operating system or Unix one called Tails. That's the preferred one that most of them use. And make sure you have a really good VPN provider to hide your original IP address, because if you end up going somewhere you shouldn't, you can end up logging yourself into the ISPs and stuff like that. You don't want that kind of tracing back to you, nor do you want to want people to come back and trace to you if you do something weird. And it's really just to protect yourself. It's darknet hygiene. Don't use your computer to go to the direct darknet. Use another computer, use a separate operating system, please, and you've been warned. I'm just wondering, are there any questions before I jump into this? I don't even know where the thing are here.
No, not yet. Just we'll keep you informed.
Okay, so yeah, if you guys have any questions, please. So you'll see here that when I went from there, I clicked on one of the products, and it goes basically to a similar thing that you would find at any of those shopping sites. It shows you the product, what you're going to pay for it, any shipping costs, those kind of things. And really, there's no difference here other than it's selling some sort of illegal activity. You can actually select which cryptocurrency you can pay with. In this case, I selected Bitcoin, but you'll find out later that Monero is also the other one. And And they tell you directly there it's an escrow service. So your funds are going to go to the darknet operator, in this case, Canizon, and they're going to make sure that when you get your product, or that the seller gets their fees and stuff like that. And they take a little percentage off the top for doing that. So once you're in there, there's an interesting little thing that happens with the PGP encryption, or pretty good privacy. And if you don't know what PGP is, you can Google it. It's basically a security protocol that allows you to do encryption and decryption of messages, similar to what Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies use to validate and send transactions through the network. It basically has a public key and a private key, and use your private key and the person's public key to encrypt things, and vice versa. You can use your private key to decrypt a message from somebody who sends you their public key. So there's a lot of tools out there. This has been around for a pretty long time, and it's working pretty successfully. So what's happening here is they want you to take your PGP, take your address, and encrypt it with your private key and their public key, so that this way you're not actually going to be transmitting your address through the internet in the clear. And this is just another level of security that basically allows them to feel comfortable with what they're doing, and really it allows them to keep everybody safe within the network. I don't know how good it is, and you'll see it later, but it's just the way they're doing things. They're trying to morph and make sure that they're not divulging anything really. So once you do that and you encrypt your address and send it to them, they get that address, they confirm it to you back to you in another message. But I skipped that. The next part of it is actually taking now their message from the service that shows you what crypto address to send it to. So what you have to do now is take their message and actually decrypt it using their public key. Their public key with your private key. And what ends up happening is you end up getting this message which says, please verify your original onions on Dread, Darknet Live, or Darkfail. So they're giving you a warning first to say, hey, we're giving you this, but you should make sure you're actually on the website because you might be being spoofed. And so that they want you to check that, and they want you to read the instructions. And there's a bunch of things in here, but they specifically tell you to send 0.126191 BTC to this specific address. And remember, it's not displayed on their website. It's actually an encrypted message that you have to use your own PGP tool to decrypt to get it. So that's another way of keeping it protected. And I think it's also another way they're trying to circumvent the AML investigation tools, which I'll get to later. Some of the things like chain analysis and CipherTrace and stuff. So again, your information is encrypted so that they don't, the address is not sent in the clear, and then the address where you're going to send the stuff to for escrow is encrypted, and that again is not in the clear. So they're trying their best to circumvent detection, circumvent any leaks or anything on the internet that may happen between your connection and their server. Next slide. So once that's all done and it's all set, and you've sent your Bitcoin through your wallet or hosted wallet, and hopefully it didn't get detected, you end up going through and the package gets delivered. There's usually a tracking number that the seller provided the darknet operator with. And once that tracking number says, hey, it's been shipped, the darknet market operator releases the funds and then comes back and asks you to rate their service like any other marketplace. So it's pretty interesting that they've got a rating service to find out how many transactions this seller has done and how many transactions this buyer has done, and they've got positive and negative news or neutral, thumbs up, thumbs down, and you can even put in a comment saying, hey, thanks, great, the package arrived, loved it, or the sellers, this is the 10th time I've dealt with this seller and he's done a great job and never fails me. But at the end of the day, it's just like any other shopping site. They're trying to attract buyers and sellers, or in this case, they're saying vendors. So now that we've walked through one, I want to go through another one called the world markets. And again, there's literally hundreds of these, but this is the typical example of most of the darknet markets that are out there. We already went through the drugs. This is sort of a list of the kind of drugs that they have: concentrates, edibles, seeds, even cocaine, Adderall, speed, meth, you name it. We actually went through one of the things or clients that I've gone through. We saw how, and I'll show you in a minute, how the fentanyl crisis matched sort of the path of the darknet market before it got closed down. And I'll talk about that darknet market in a minute, but it just shows you the scope of what you can buy in the category of drugs. The next one is fraud. You've all heard probably that people are buying credit cards and CVV numbers and bank logins and data dumps. It's all here. Like, I mean, if you want a data dump of the ledger, you probably will be able to find. The ledger was hacked a few months ago, I guess, maybe about a month ago. They're the actual wallet or hardware wallet provider, and somebody hacked into their database and stole all their email addresses. So this is probably where those criminals are getting them. They're selling them out. And you see the spearing attacks or different types of attacks to the phone, SIM swaps, things like that. But you can get all kinds of logins. You can get date of birth, social insurance numbers, things to prove that you have a identity, but it's not your identity. A lot of these things are used for third-party transactions. For example, I don't know if you know this, but there's a thing that happens on a lot of these shopping sites where a criminal will get access to a credit card, access to an Amazon account, promote that they're selling a product for, let's say, 50% off using that hacked account. Somebody comes in and buys it, they use their credit card, and then they're using a stolen credit card to actually buy the product from somebody else to ship it to this person that's actually trying to buy it from this person in the middle. And basically he's acting as a conduit in the middle, and they're using these stolen identities and stolen credit cards to actually get the money from Amazon before they get detected. And then the way they get those monies is they send them to another bank account that's been hacked. So they've literally got all these different touch points to basically not be able to be detected. So this is where they can get some of that stuff. Now, some of it works, some of it does. I've read some of the darknet groups, and some people get really upset. So that's why they have this whole thumbs up, thumbs down system, because the more you do transactions, the more people are happy, the more likely those people are the ones that are actually got the information. But there's tons out there. And if you really want to get into it, they've got guides, hundreds and hundreds of guides, how to do that Amazon thing I just told you, how to do it on eBay, how to use social engineering to find out who the people are in a company and then infiltrate the company and send them emails, how to do DNS spoofing, how to do SMTP routing, all kinds of stuff. You just decide what you want. And if you don't want to hack, they also even have commercial software. Like you want to get a whole copy of Windows or Windows Office or 360. They've got that hack. They've got the keys. They've got exploits on how to go through websites that have WordPress and bots and malwares and everything. So you go through there, you find the sellers that have got really good ratings, and most likely those things are working, and you can buy that stuff too. So it's a smorgasbord of basically being able to do fraudulent activities. And then the creme de la creme, next oops, I guess let's go back a slide because I realized I deleted a slide. The next two, I'll get to the last one in a second, but the next one I forgot to add a slide, I'm sorry, is the counterfeit items. So you can get counterfeit passports, you can get counterfeit driver's license, you can get, and some of these are real. They've actually hacked the database where somebody has stored all the KYC or CDD information and just stolen it. And you can buy a false ID for like $100 and take that, and you've got the bill statement, you've got the financial statement, you've got the ID, you've got the ID with a selfie, and maybe a little blank page where you can write, this is for XYZ company's use only on today's date. So they've got all that stuff. They've even got videos on how to spoof the detection systems for the liveliness tests. So you could take your I just briefly read it, but they've got ways of actually spoofing that stuff, and the digital guides will actually show you. So the next one, which was the last one on the tabs there, is really services. You can find almost any type of service, from getting massive likes and followers to rent a hacker. I mean, this guy here is saying, I'll scam people for you for 50 euros. Like social engineering, I'll figure out how to trick somebody into do something you want. And they give you all kinds of packages and options that you can pick. And they want you to pay anonymously with Bitcoin. They can also give you a whole package for doing this whole social media thing, everything from YouTube to TikTok to Telegram to Facebook, and basically create you a presence within like a week. And you have all these followers, and you have all this stuff all done for you, and you can perpetrate a scam. So obviously price is not an option for some people, and they can do this. So think about it. You can buy any service you want, promote any service you want, make it look like it's backdated 3 years. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I think I gave the link in here somewhere. You can actually go to the Darknet dictionary, and they'll tell you all the different terms that these people are using. Everything from D&D to 420, if you don't know what 420 is, 3DD, EDD, CDD, they basically explain everything. And this way you can sort of understand what some of the lingo is, like wares and all kinds of other stuff. But there's a dictionary there for it. Let's go to the next slide. This is an older typology. Recently, there was a darknet website called the Canadian Headquarters Market. It actually had been operating since 2018. So this is one of the older typologies. It just recently got discovered, I guess in September, October, and was all over the different analytic tools. And soon after that, it actually shut down and hasn't really seen any traffic going to that website or those Bitcoin addresses since. I actually had an account before they got shut down. It was very similar to the world markets because it was trying to investigate some stuff. And they were basically, they had the private wallets, they had the merchant services, the escrow services. They made sure that when they were receiving crypto from people, they were never using that same address to send. So they started using different things like mixers and tumblers, which I'll get to in the next slide. The second typology, lately what we've been seeing is there's a unique, so the previous one was there was a unique address for each user, and that was about it. So if they did 3 or 4 transactions, they would actually have a unique address that would be sent to all the time to the escrow service. Lately, since this a lot of the darknet sites have been taken down, and Anu gave a good explanation about that Australian who was caught in the Netherlands, and they found the website, and I'll tell you what some of the reason why they found that kind of stuff, but they found 500,000 people in this darknet market. So a lot of the existing darknet markets have quickly adopted. And one of the things that they're doing now is they're having every transaction, every client, unique address, making sure that when they're receiving those crypto addresses, before they would receive them into like a cluster, now they're making sure that they receive only to 2 addresses. So it looks like it's going from a wallet to wallet rather than going to a cluster. And they're using all kinds of stuff. And they're getting really good at it. They're using P2P transfer services. They're using mixers. They're using unnamed merchant services, ATMs, and even DeFi now with sushi swaps and all these other different contracts that are out there on the Ethereum network. And if you don't know what the Ethereum network is, I suggest you Google it because it's another type of crypto. But they now even have wrapped Bitcoin so that you can actually use these contracts with Bitcoin inside an Ethereum network and send stuff out that way. There's all kinds of ways they're just figuring it out, and they just keep morphing. This is an example of how the darknets usually work. They start off pretty zero back in April 2019. I think this was the Canadian market headquarters, if I'm not mistaken. And once they detect the clusters, they put them all together, and you can see how it grows, and it just grows and grows and grows until it gets caught. Now, this one here is definitely not the Canadian darknet market. The Canadian darknet market, you can see the patterns growing, and then it drops off at the end of November to next to zero. So I apologize, I didn't get the right diagram here. But this is the type of thing that you'll see with those clusters. So the recent takedowns and stuff that is happening with darknet, the one that Anu talked about earlier, there was another one that happened this week with a German who bought a bunker, and in the bunker had put in all these servers to service the darknet. And one of the interesting things with Germany is you're allowed to be a service provider of web hosting and all kinds of other things. And if you get caught hosting something like a darknet or some illegal activity, it's a really high bar to prove that you were involved with it. So this guy was pretty good for a couple years, and he finally got arrested this week, and they found something like 400 servers, 57 cell phones, 30-something notebooks and PCs, and all kinds of communication. They've been stalking him for like 2-3 years, waiting for the final moment because they really wanted to have a lot of meat on him so they could charge him. And then they went in there, and the article actually goes on to describe what law enforcement are excited about. The quote was, "We've got a lot of information that we're going to be doing charges for the next 2 to 3 years at least." So this ended up one of the largest darknet markets, called the White House market, literally dropped Bitcoin as support. They realized that chain analysis and cipher trace and all these other tools, which I'll talk about in a minute, are tracking them. So they're basically going straight to Monero support. If you don't know what Monero is, you might want to Google it as well. But it's basically a privacy coin that has pretty good privacy. They have internal mixers and all kinds of ways of bundling things so that when it comes in and goes out, you can't tell anything. I know there's some of those providers have some interesting ways of finding it, but Monero is pretty much the go-to now for the darknet markets. So if you see stuff going into those or into sushi swaps or any of these DeFi contract swaps, you might want to take a look at it and see if there's any Monero part of it as well, because it's interesting what they're trying to do here. Some of the indicators of darknet activity, and I'm only going to touch on a few of them, but one of the things that darknet does offer is there are people that may be cancer patients or have some sort of drug addiction or things like that. I don't know if you've noticed in Canada, we had a drug problem with a lot of people getting legal prescriptions to Oxycontin and fentanyl and stuff like that. And what ended up happening was the government came down hard on the doctors and the prescriptions. So a lot of these people were left with an addiction and couldn't find anywhere else to get it. So that was one of the reasons why the darknet market started popping up a little bit more on these types of drugs. We actually found one person who social profile indicated that they had cancer and that they couldn't afford the cancer drugs that were part of prescriptions. So they ended up we ended up catching him doing darknet activity, and he was probably buying cancer drugs for his cancer. So there are people that are in there that are doing it out of desperation, are doing it to continue their addiction. Granted, there's a lot of people that are legal too, but you got to realize that some of these people are just victims of the system, victim of things like that. Another pattern which happens everywhere, if you think about eBay and Amazon, they're reoccurring payments. They're continually buying stuff to the same addresses. But again, remember the topology has changed, and now they're having unique addresses. So you got to sort of start looking more at the transactions themselves and know your customer. Really know what they're doing. Try and figure out, do some enhanced due diligence. Maybe they are that cancer patient. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're the person that's actually buying the drugs. I remember catching one guy who was a painter, and he had a painting crew, and that painting crew was full of college students, and we caught him buying stuff from a Korean exchange that linked to a pharmaceutical company in Korea that was selling Adderall type drugs. And he was actually using his network to distribute them through his painters. And so we saw the patterns. And again, remember the darknet pattern. The transactions just got larger and larger and larger as he grew his network. Right? So you'll see those reoccurring payments, and you'll see them growing and growing. The next part of indicators, look for darknet, look for open source intelligence, or what people call OSINT. There's tons out there, media, articles, reports. Just look. I know Google is sometimes a little bit hairy, but there's a lot of information there. Try and use specific words like scam, fraud, drugs, things like that sort of clarify things. And really target what your searches are. And there's also tools out there that are taking those adverse media. I know at KYC 2020, we have one we're developing with AI and hired a data scientists and stuff like that. But there's a lot of them out there. I think even Alessa has a portion. I can't remember. I haven't really looked at that product in a while. But there's a lot of tools that take those open source intelligence and digest them for you. Use them. And part of that open source intelligence is the Department of Justice, for example, in the U.S. publishes things when they're charging people, when they've got somebody to plead guilty. Look at those things. Look at read the indictments, read the charges, and you'll find a lot of the indicators in there. And think about how those indicators may be in your system, but you just haven't looked for it yet. So look for consistent patterns that come from those reports. Educate yourself, get knowledge. So another bunch of indicators is this bogus explanation. As this girl here is trying to tell her story, you've done your enhanced due diligence and you're asking questions either through email or through chat or through social media or through DMs or whatever, and the story just doesn't add up to what you're seeing related to darknet activity or mixing or tumblers or all these other terms. And I'm not going to go into it because we don't have time today, but Google them, you'll see what I mean. And usually there's one of the tools like Cipher Trace, Chain Analysis, and Clue find these things after the fact and then recluster what they think might be as well related to those darknet clusters. So use the tools. At least have one of them, probably two. I'll say that again later on. But these tools are out there. Use them. They're really good. What else? You'll see things like VPNs. Again, by themselves, these are all just indicators. When you start combining them, then you can paint a story against what you know about the customer. And I'm using my Italian hand signs here. But VPNs, they're good and bad. Some people want to protect themselves, and criminals want to protect themselves. So realize that people are using them for both reasons. You'll see a lot of P2P or intermediary transactions between different things, like I told you earlier. They're trying to obfuscate where the actual escrow service is. So you see a lot of peer-to-peer or person-to-person or private wallet-to-private wallet transactions. You'll see the phone numbers. If you're good at catching fraud, one of the things you should be doing is checking if the phone is a VoIP. Anybody can get a VoIP phone. You can download Text Now from Google and get your own phone number local to where you are, and it's a VoIP phone. You can have people call you on it, everything like that, but it's not physically where you are. So you could be in India and have a phone number in Toronto. And that's how a lot of those spoofing scams and CRA scams are doing it. They're using those types of VoIP phones or voice over internet protocol. And one of the last things is the email address. Proton Mail is definitely one of those encrypted email services. They actually have now like 6 or 7 different domains. I think one is like pm.me and all kinds of other stuff. But that's one of the indicators. The prefix, though, is another indicator. Sometimes it's something that tells you what it is, like the Canadian bad guy. Sometimes it tells you that nothing, in the sense that it's some jarbled bunch of letters and numbers and stuff like that. That should be an indicator. Again, it's also an indicator of somebody trying to protect themselves and be private, but it's also an indicator of potential illegal activity. Ways to report. So above the STRs and the SARs and voluntary information and things like that, there are some pretty interesting websites. Bitcoin Abuse is one of them. They've been around for a long time. They take reports from anybody and everybody as long as you can show a little bit of the information. I'm not 100% sure that all of it's good, but they have a lot in there. And if you report it, usually one or all of the tools picks it up, like Chain Analysis or CipherTrace, Elliptic, and Clue. Same with Scam Alert. If you report it there, usually one of those engines or all of them are actually feeding off of those things. And there's lots of other ones. If you Google how to report crypto scams and stuff like that, you'll see even government websites like the Fair Trade Commission or the FCA in UK, or even I haven't really seen it from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, other than alerts coming out once in a while and things like that. But there are ways to report it, and a lot of the tools pick up those reports. So consider using something else as well. If you're not reporting it through the tools, consider reporting it somewhere else. And if you're a victim, it might not help you get your money back, but it will help somebody else probably on not getting scammed. Okay. Key takeaways. Like that girl pulling the rock up the mountain, Darknet is not going to go away. It's been around since the late 80s, and it's still going to, and it's just going to keep morphing. It's just going to figure out ways to keep selling it. There's a need out there, like that Australian who had 500,000 people in his system. You got to think, wow, that's a lot of people. So it's just going to keep growing and growing. I don't think it's something that's ever going to go away, and it's just going to get more and more obfuscated. So keep up to date with tools, keep up to date with trends, gain the knowledge, read those documents, read the indicators, read the stuff that the regulators push out, go to those sessions that CipherTrace and Elliptic and Chain Analysis and Clue put on. Learn. I can't teach you anything in 45 minutes. I only can scratch the surface, right? So I think I'm more of a deep diver, and even though I don't deep dive, I know a few people do, but I think I'm more of a deep diver because I don't know why, but I'm obsessed about learning it, about thinking about it, trying to find these people. And like I said earlier, have 2 or more investigation tools at least for the chain stuff. Some of them are good at some aspects, some of them are good at others. The more tools you have, the better you can see these kind of things.
Very good. So Joseph, I'd like to thank you once again for joining us. It's a fantastic presentation. And I know Nicole and I were just super excited because we don't know very much about this topic. And so giving us this overview really helps us to understand a little more around the risks. For those who are, still on the line, thank you very much for joining us. Like Joseph mentioned, he's open to connecting with you and answering any questions you may have. Just make sure you put that note that you watched the ILESA webinar. And we look forward to hosting Joseph again on this topic and other topics. Because Joseph does have a lot of experience in a lot of areas, and we hope that he's open to sharing them with you through the ILESA webinar series. So thank you again, and this concludes our presentation.
Thanks, Anu. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining. Have a great day.